I never thought I'd be standing on the sidewalk at midnight, holding 2 trash bags that contained my entire life, staring at the house I grew up in like I was a stranger. If this story hits close to home, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt pushed out by the people who were supposed to protect you. I was the quiet child, the one who didn't ask for much. Growing up, I believed if I worked hard, stayed respectful, and didn't cause trouble, I'd always have a place at home. That house wasn't fancy, peeling paint, creaky floors, constant tension, but it was familiar. It was supposed to be safe. Money was always tight. My parents fought about bills in whispers they thought I couldn't hear. I helped where I could, skipping outings, wearing old clothes, telling myself this was temporary. My sister, though, was different. Louder. More demanding. She knew how to pull attention, how to turn emotions into leverage. When my parents told me to sit down that evening, their voices were calm in a way that made my chest tighten. They said things like family decisions and what's best for everyone. What they really meant was simple. Everything they had was being handed to my sister, and I was no longer welcome under their roof. I walked out with silence behind me, my mind racing, my heart heavy, and no idea where I was supposed to go next. That first night, I slept on a bus bench because I didn't know who I was allowed to call anymore. My phone was at 12%, my stomach was empty, and every passing car sounded louder than it should have. I kept replaying my mother's words in my head, "You're strong. You'll figure it out." It didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like permission to forget me. By morning, shame settled in. I went to work wearing the same clothes, pretending nothing had happened. My coworker asked why I looked tired, and I laughed it off, even though my hands were shaking. Inside, I felt small, like I had failed some invisible test everyone else passed naturally. Adults weren't supposed to end up like this. Not without warning. I tried calling my parents that evening. My dad answered, his voice distant. "We just need space right now," he said. I could hear the TV in the background, my sister laughing. I imagined her in my old room, my space, my bed. When the call ended, the silence hit harder than hunger. That night, I lay on the floor of a cheap room I rented by the week, listening to pipes knock and strangers argue through thin walls. I told myself this was temporary, but fear whispered back, what if this is it now? Days blurred together into a routine I didn't choose. Wake up sore. Eat as little as possible. Work. Come back to the room that smelled like damp carpet and regret. Every dollar mattered, yet somehow it was never enough. Rent. Food. Phone bill. Survival had no space for dignity. I stopped talking about my family. When people asked, I'd say, "They're fine," because explaining felt worse than lying. At night, my thoughts got cruel. Maybe you deserve this. Maybe you weren't worth fighting for. I hated that voice, but it sounded convincing when I was alone. One evening, I ran into my sister at the grocery store. She looked comfortable, new jacket, relaxed smile. She talked about renovations at the house like it was always meant to be hers. "You're doing okay, right?" she asked, already reaching for her phone. I nodded, even though my throat burned. Telling the truth would have meant admitting I was losing. After she left, I stood in the aisle longer than necessary, staring at prices I couldn't afford. People moved around me like I wasn't there. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just homeless. I was erased. From my family. From my place. From the story I thought I belonged in. And the scariest part was realizing no one was coming to fix it. By the second month, exhaustion stopped being dramatic and became routine. I learned which days the grocery store discounted bread, which bus routes were warmest in winter, which coworkers wouldn't ask questions. I smiled automatically now, even when my chest felt hollow. Survival didn't look heroic. It looked quiet and tired. At work, mistakes started slipping in. A wrong number here. A missed deadline there. My supervisor pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if everything was okay. I said yes too quickly. Lying felt safer than explaining that my life had collapsed, and I was pretending it hadn't. When he nodded, unconvinced, my stomach dropped. I couldn't afford to lose this job. I couldn't afford anything. At night, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, birthdays, holidays, my parents' living room before it stopped being mine. I wondered how easily they slept knowing I was struggling. Then guilt followed. They raised you. They don't owe you forever. That thought hurt almost as much as the rejection. One evening, my mom texted, "Hope you're doing well." No question. No offer. Just a sentence that felt like a closed door. I typed a reply, erased it, then turned the phone face down. The room felt smaller than before, like the walls were leaning in, waiting for me to admit I was breaking. The pressure started showing in my body before I admitted it mentally. Headaches that wouldn't fade. Hands trembling when I counted cash. Sleep that never felt deep enough. Some mornings, I sat on the edge of the bed, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending I was okay. Friends stopped inviting me out after I kept saying no. I didn't blame them. Poverty makes you boring. You're always tired, always distracted, always calculating. I hated myself for feeling jealous when they talked about vacations or moving into better places. I hated myself more for feeling invisible. One night, after a long shift, I checked my bank balance and laughed out loud. It was either that or cry. Rent was due. Again. I considered calling my parents, rehearsed what I'd say, imagined swallowing my pride. Then I pictured my sister's face, the comfort she lived in now, and the words stuck in my throat. I lay in the dark listening to sirens outside, thinking about how close I was to the edge. Not dramatically, just quietly. Like a slow leak no one notices until everything's empty. I wasn't chasing dreams anymore. I was just trying not to disappear. The breaking point didn't arrive with a loud moment. It crept in through small humiliations. My card getting declined at the checkout while people waited behind me. Pretending I wasn't hungry during lunch breaks. Smiling when coworkers talked about family dinners, then eating crackers alone at night. I started avoiding mirrors because I didn't recognize the person looking back. Thinner. Older. Tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Some nights, I'd wake up convinced I heard my parents' voices, only to realize it was the building settling or someone arguing downstairs. The past haunted me more than the present. One weekend, I passed my old neighborhood without meaning to. The house looked the same. Lights on. Curtains open. Life continuing without me. I stood across the street longer than I should have, heart pounding, hoping someone would notice. No one did. I walked away feeling foolish for expecting anything else. Back in my room, I sat on the floor because the bed felt too heavy. I thought about how quickly belonging can be revoked. How love can come with conditions you only learn about when it's too late. I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. And that scared me more than the fear ever had. I didn't wake up inspired. I woke up exhausted in a way that felt permanent. The kind where even worrying feels like too much effort. I went through the motions on autopilot, barely listening when people spoke, barely reacting when things went wrong. It was like my mind had hit a wall. One night, sitting alone with the lights off, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Not dramatically. Not bravely. Just honestly. This wasn't surviving anymore, it was eroding. I felt pressure in my chest. Not panic, but something heavier. Acceptance maybe. Or surrender. The thought scared me. If nothing changed, this would be my life. If something changed, it could still fail. Both options felt terrifying. I wasn't suddenly hopeful. I was confused. Afraid. Tired of being strong by default. I whispered to myself, barely audible, something has to move. Not I will succeed. Not I'll prove them wrong. Just that the stillness was killing me. I didn't know what to do yet. I didn't know how. I only knew I couldn't stay here forever, even if I had no idea what came next. The fear didn't disappear just because I acknowledged it. If anything, it became clearer. Sharper. I started noticing how much of my life was ruled by avoiding risk, avoiding embarrassment, rejection, another closed door. Playing it safe, it kept me alive, but it had also trapped me. Late one night, I sat with a notebook I'd carried around for months but never opened. I wrote down numbers first. Income. Rent. Food. What was left was almost insulting. Then I wrote options. Not dreams. Options. Extra shifts. A cheaper room farther away. Learning a skill I'd always pushed aside because it felt unrealistic. None of it felt exciting. It felt terrifying. I kept thinking, what if I try and still fail? But another thought followed, quieter and harder to ignore. What if I don't try at all? That answer scared me more. There was no big promise made to myself, just a decision to lean forward instead of freezing. I told myself I'd give it 6 months. No miracles. Just effort and honesty. I knew it could cost me what little comfort I had left. I knew I might end up right back where I started. Still, for the first time in a long while, the fear wasn't stopping me. It was walking beside me. Change was slow and uncomfortable. I picked up extra work, even when my body protested. I moved into a smaller place farther from everything I knew, trading familiarity for affordability. Commutes got longer. Days got heavier. But something subtle shifted. I was choosing this. I started learning after work, tired and frustrated, rereading the same pages because my brain felt fried. Some nights, I wondered if I was wasting time I didn't have. Progress was uneven. I failed small tests, missed chances, almost quit more than once. There were setbacks that hurt more because I'd hoped quietly. An application rejection. A week where money dipped too low again. I sat on my bed one evening, head in my hands, thinking I'd been naive to believe effort mattered. But then something small happened. A minor opportunity. A slightly better paycheck. Enough to breathe for a moment. That moment mattered more than it should have. It wasn't success. It was proof of movement. I wasn't stuck anymore, even if I was still struggling. The pressure didn't vanish. It just changed shape. Now it came with responsibility. If I stopped, it would be on me. And strangely, that scared me less than being helpless ever did. The outcome wasn't a dramatic transformation. There was no sudden apology from my parents. No moment where everything made sense. What changed was quieter. After months of scraping and second-guessing, I stabilized. Not rich. Not comfortable. Just steady. Rent paid on time. Food in the fridge without counting every dollar twice. Sleep that lasted through the night more often than not. I didn't move back home. I stopped waiting for the call that would never come. My relationship with my family stayed distant, and accepting that hurt, but it hurt less than chasing closure that wasn't offered. I learned that being chosen by yourself matters when others don't choose you. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't losing the house. It was losing the belief that love was unconditional and surviving that loss without turning bitter. I learned how quickly security can disappear and how slowly it has to be rebuilt. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. If there's one thing this experience gave me, it's clarity. I know now that stability is earned quietly, and self-respect grows when you stop begging for space and start creating your own. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, or tell someone who needs to hear this they're not weak for starting over. Sometimes, surviving is the victory, and that's enough.